We are extremely lucky to have Hal and Sloane with us today. Hal has been a kind of job seeker's hero recently, a Robin Hood, in the articles written about him, and he's been in MSN and some other well-read blogs. The headlines about him go something like this: how he got a job with just one tweet. Well, as we're going to learn today, this is kind of an exaggeration. And like all of these things, there was a lot more to his story than the articles had alluded to. And we'll find out what else he did besides that pivotal tweet. And there was indeed a lot leading up to that. So, in a large part of Hal's success has been the fact that his hiring manager, Sloane, made Twitter the primary medium through which to evaluate candidates. So there was last webinar was a lot about LinkedIn. Today we're going to be focusing more on other mediums such as Twitter, blogging, and other creative outlets online. And Sloane was looking for someone who was creative, energetic, and who knew how to use Twitter as part of the job description. So it really made a whole lot of sense for her to leverage the very tool that she required to have some kind of competency in. So we'll hear today how Hal used the combination of blogging, online reputation management, and creative design to stand out from a crowd. And we'll also get Sloane's perspective as his hiring manager about what she looks for in candidates, and what was it exactly about Hal's application that appealed to her throughout his hiring process. And also I'll jump in every once in a while to tie things back to the frameworks that I like to teach, such as the 3 questions, the reticular activating system, but we'll cover those during the conversation as things get there. So with that, Sloane, ladies first. Let's start off with you. What do you do with BFG Communications, and why did you use Twitter to hire someone?
Sure. Well, first off, many thanks for having me join your webinar today. Really excited to dig into some of the questions later in the session. And a little bit of background on me and BFG as well. I've been working with BFG for about 3.5 years, and BFG Communications is a full-service ad agency. We've been really growing our interactive division a lot since I started here. In fact, the content department, which I head up at the moment, was about 4 years ago, and really I think BFG has been kind of a cutting-edge ad agency in that respect. They realized early on that it was important to invest in social media and content marketing as well. So it's been a really exciting ride over the last couple of years, and we really started getting quite busy in the content department over the last 9 to 12 months or so. And so late in the summer, early fall, I had a need for a new staff member to join our team, and went to the head of the agency and our executive creative director and sat down with them and kind of started describing my ideal candidate, and also really dug into the fact that, it's not a traditional job. We decided we were looking for an assistant content manager, a non-traditional type position. I think of BFG as a pretty non-traditional type agency. So we didn't want to take, the traditional, resume and cover letter approach. And so what I decided to do, and the heads of the agency really agreed with it and kind of let me run with it, was to actually go to Twitter and post this job. And I wasn't really sure, in the beginning exactly what kind of response I was going to get. It ended up being incredibly positive. We had a lot of interest in the job, and probably around 150 or so applications through Twitter. And really the reason that I went there, there were really a couple, I guess. One is that the assistant content manager position really demanded someone who, knows a whole lot about social media, is, very savvy with Twitter and some of the other tools that are out there. And also just, Twitter itself is a really interesting medium. A lot of people who aren't familiar with it or who haven't dug into it think of it as just 140 characters of text. But there's so much you can do with that 140 characters. And it's really sky's the limit. You can do everything from photos to video to whatever. So I thought it would be an interesting way to have someone introduce themselves to us and to really show us, why we would consider them, really be creative in their response. And the applications that we received really, they ran the gamut. And ultimately, the application that Hal sent via Twitter was what really caught my eye early on in our search. And of course, he ended up making it through our interview process and recently joined the team.
Sloane, you mentioned something yesterday when we were chatting, and which was that you felt like you really got to know the candidates, who they were personally, long before you even got to meet them. And that's something unique, I think, to social media. You did not have that experience with just a traditional resume.
Exactly. It was really interesting meeting, or even in the case of a couple of candidates, we would Skype for their interview if they were far away from me. But it was interesting just in the sense that, I could follow these people back on Twitter and see what they're up to on a daily basis, the kinds of things that they're thinking about, maybe some of the more seemingly mundane things, what movie they're watching or whatever. But they all paint a picture of someone's personality. And ultimately, I was looking for someone who, wasn't just qualified to do this job, but was really would be a good cultural fit for the agency, and someone that will hopefully be here for a long time and make this a long stop of their career. So it was very interesting. And when I met these people, it wasn't for the first time. It wasn't always the traditional first interview type questions, because I felt like I did have a better sense of who most of these folks were because of Twitter.
Definitely. Very cool. And we'll get back to the three questions of do I like you and what motivates you and can you do the job in just a minute. But I want to give Hal a chance to introduce himself and let him tell his story. And meanwhile, for listeners out there, please use the side panel there for questions. Go ahead and ask your questions as we're talking. And then I will read them and field them to our panelists today. So go ahead and, as questions pop into your mind, go ahead and pop those in. So welcome, Hal.
Hello.
So wondering, what do you do for BFG? It's a non-traditional role. And share with us what you did during your job search that really set you apart from everyone else.
Okay, sure. And I want to say thanks again just for having me. I really appreciate you including me as a part of this panel. So I'm very, very happy about that, Joshua. BFG, what does an assistant content manager do? Well, it's kind of a fun job because it looks a little bit different every day, depending on what our client needs are. But there are a couple things that do hold somewhat consistent on a daily, weekly basis. BFG's had a blog for about 5 years now, and so I'm one of the contributors now to our external blog here at BFG. In addition, we also have an internal blog that is kind of proprietary just for a lot of our field agents and internal members of the company. And so I contribute to our internal blog as well. Kind of part and parcel with writing for these two blogs, an assistant content manager does a lot of trend spotting and a lot of online research. So part of the job is taking the pulse of what's happening out there in social media and digital media, really kind of in what's going on in marketing and promotions all across the board, and being able to speak to that whenever called upon, whether it's for an internal company blog or whether it's for a presentation to a client or compiling research for presentation decks. And then also being a resource for brainstorming sessions when we tap creative and strategy for our clients. What else do you want to know?
Talk to me about your job search. You were hired just recently, weren't you?
Yeah, it's been about 6 or 7 weeks ago.
Okay. What did you do during your search that really set you apart from yourself? We all know that you're the one tweet job applicant, but what more was there to your story?
Yeah, I think that's kind of finding its way into the realm of kind of like internet urban myths. The guy that got a tweet with, or got a job with one tweet. Really, I think my search and really the story starts about 2 years ago when I started freelancing, and I was freelancing marketing and branding strategy and graphic design. And so when I first started, when you're a freelancer, you're really kind of always on the job hunt. Whether it's for a long-term gig or short-term clients, you're really always looking for jobs. And so I think it began first with my blog, and my blog really just became kind of my own platform to call out things that I thought were important within the industry, whether it's online or offline marketing and promotions. It was a place to kind of showcase where my head was at. I worked out of my house, and so I didn't have the luxury of having an office or people to collaborate with. So when I would go out and meet people socially, and you hand them a business card, having that blog on your website to be able to go to allows them to dive deeper into who you are and get a sense of your perspective on advertising, on marketing, on media, and really get a better handle of kind of what your capabilities or your perspective is. I started blogging, I guess it's been almost 2.5 years ago. I jumped on Twitter. It would have been early 2008, so I was maybe 6 or 8 months behind the curve. I wouldn't say I was an immediate earlier adopter, but I'd like to go on record as saying that I was definitely pre-Kuchar and pre-Oprah as far as the Twitter bandwagon goes. And Twitter, it was like I got involved like a lot of people, just trying to check this thing out and see what was going on. There were several people whose blogs that I followed that were on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And so I just started off by following people that I was kind of already interested in, and really just kind of tried to figure it out from there. Mm-hmm. With that said, that's kind of how I used my blog. That's kind of how I used Twitter. Twitter for me was just another, really just another opportunity to network with people. I don't know that I really treated Twitter a whole lot differently than you might treat some type of business or social function where you meet people that way. Through those relationships that you form, there become opportunities to talk about business opportunities or to find out about business opportunities. But it wasn't something that I intended to use exclusively for the purpose of just finding a job or getting more clients.
Hal, let me pause you right there. And there were some questions about what is Twitter. Could we back up a second and talk about what it is? So I want to send a poll out to everybody out there, and I want to take about 20 seconds to do this. So I'm going to send a poll out, and basically it's going to say, do you have a Twitter account that you use daily? So go ahead, I'll give you guys 20 seconds if you could just say yes or no. And then I'll close that poll in 10 seconds. Okay, about 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Okay, here are the results. Looks like most people, 64% of you out there, you have a Twitter account that you use daily. So maybe it would make sense to kind of back up Hal and talk about what is Twitter a little bit. You talked about it as a relationship building engine, and that's really how I see what Twitter is. It constricts you to about 140 characters, and you can connect with anybody. There aren't a lot of rules to Twitter. It's sort of self-defined. I think you guys would agree with that. A lot of people use it differently. Mm-hmm. And in the context of... Right, go ahead, Hal.
I tried to explain Twitter to my dad. My dad is 50 plus, we'll say, and is a structural engineer and has been, for the last 35 years. And so we were talking a little bit about my job over the course of the holidays. And so we started talking a little bit about Twitter, and he's like, so explain this Twitter thing to me, because I don't get it. And so I was trying to search for an example that would frame it in a context that would be relevant to him. And what I came up with is he's a big fan of University of South Carolina football.
Okay.
And so he gets online and goes into the fan forums and bulletin boards and checks out the things that people are saying on all the bulletin boards within the University of South Carolina's sports program website. And so I said, think of Twitter like a bulletin board or a message board where you can go in and post what you're thinking or what you're saying. And so what you can do is only you're limited to 140 characters, so you can't go on a long diatribe there. I said, but now imagine that bulletin board is not limited to just Gamecock football. It's about any topic you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then also imagine you have an additional level of control, is that if you find someone that you don't like their opinions, you don't like what they're saying, or whatever they're saying is not of interest to you, you can choose not to see that. So you can choose really only to listen to the perspective of people that you find interesting or entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I explained it to him that way, I think it helped him out a little more. And certainly that's a simplified example, and there are a lot of additional benefits to Twitter with the ability to search for terms, and that way you can kind of narrow your focus on what you want to listen to or what you want to find out about. But
sorry, Hal, a lot of the answers about how to use Twitter and what is it and how to get tweeting is actually available in the Job Seeker's Guide to Social Media. So there's a couple of videos that take you from scratch to actually using it to conduct a job search, similar to what Hal did. And I want to show and share with everyone exactly the tweet that he used to get Sloane's attention. And that's this. So you'll see it's roughly 140 characters. And basically it takes us to two links. The first link is that Hal mocked up a Wired magazine with his picture and some information about him having already worked at BFG and taking BFG to the big time. And the second is his blog, and these are just screenshots here. And this is Hal. Looks a little bit different than that picture. I think you're wearing glasses in this. So you'll see that in a beard, right? So it wasn't just the tweet. The tweet just put him on the radar, but it was this creative intervention here, as well as the credibility that he was able to build up with having a blog and sharing his opinion. So, Sloane, let me ask you, there were a lot of other applicants. I think you said there were over 100. What were some other compelling contestants for this position, and why did you choose Hal over the other ones?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, if anyone's interested in seeing some of the more notable tweets, some of the competitors for Hal's job, so to speak, I did try to compile a lot of links to those tweets on our BFG blog. So if you go there and you just go to our search box and type in Assistant Content Manager, it should be one of the only posts that comes up, I would imagine. But people definitely took some interesting approaches. I had one applicant actually create sort of a website about why we should hire her, and it really kind of was very involved and took me through her job history and all kinds of those things. Other people went the video route, which was something I definitely anticipated when I put this out. I love making videos, so I had a feeling people would probably go to YouTube and make something, or one of the other video sharing sites and share a link. Other people went to their personal blogs and actually posted about us. We had a few people who got colleagues and friends to actually recommend them via Twitter, which I also thought was a unique approach as well. So it was really, the approach really ran the gamut. And, those are some of the good examples and things that really got my attention. And a number of those folks, certainly got first or even second round interviews. There were also, of course, the the not so good responses, sure. And a lot of those really were, there were a number of people who actually emailed me their resume, and I was really kind of taken aback by that. It just showed me that they didn't read the instructions or follow directions at all. And I didn't like that a whole lot. So those people definitely didn't get interviews. And, other folks who maybe already had a job and didn't want their employer to know that they were, in the market for a new position, they actually went ahead and sent a direct message, which I thought was totally fine. It showed me that they understand Twitter and the fact that, if there's a public comment, there's a way to make something a little bit more private. So those were definitely acceptable approaches to go the direct message route.
Can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
Direct message is a feature for Twitter newbies. It's a feature in Twitter that allows you to send a private message to someone, and only that other person can see it, whereas an @reply is for everybody to see. Just to clarify, there are a couple of folks on here who are asking about that, so I wanted to just pause you for a second, Sloane. Sorry about that.
No, I'm glad you did that, definitely. And the vast majority of the applications that we received were with the public @reply to BFG.com, which is our Twitter handle. And but yeah, Hal definitely stood out. His Wired magazine mock-up definitely got a laugh from me.
Yeah.
Humor is a good thing in my world, so I thought that was an interesting approach. And then having the link to his blog was also really great because I was able to go and poke around his blog, look at the kinds of things that he's writing about, get a sense for, his opinions on different trends, and also really identify that, he's thinking about some of the same things that we're thinking about. So that was a really great insight. And it also ultimately, this sounds really basic, but it showed me that he is a good writer as well, and that's, of course, very important for this particular position.
So the fact that he had a blog demonstrated not just competency in being able to do the job, but that he had a fit for he had his personality really fit into the creative environment of BFG. And he knew the industry, so he was going to hit the ground running.
Exactly.
Just also another pause there. I like to talk about the 3 questions, and it's a good time to talk about those. And basically, there are 3 questions that a hiring manager really needs to have answered by the applicant. The first one is do they like you or not? And that's the fit question, right, Sloane? It's are they going to come into the office and make people laugh and get along? And are you going to be comfortable managing him over the course of his employment? Then there's motivation, which is he savvy? Is he with the environment of the industry? Is he going to remain motivated throughout the course of his employment? And then the last question is, can he do the job? And I think what was so effective about this tweet here, about the mock-up, was that Hal really did a nice job showing all 3 of the questions. He showed competency with the blog, and personality with his tweet and his creativity, and definitely it was clearly motivated by the amount of work that you put into this, Hal. And I wanted to ask you, this is kind of a risky thing to do, is to put yourself on a cover of a top 10 magazine, and kind of with the name of the company that you're going for. This was probably, it would work with BFG, but it might not work with another marketing company. How did you know where to draw the line? Where did you know it was appropriate to do this? It was actually a good idea to do this, whereas somewhere else it might not have been.
I think a lot of that goes back to doing your research. You got to do your homework on the company that you're going to apply for. In a way, you might say this is kind of the job application that I've always wanted to do for just about any job, something that really doesn't kind of pigeonhole you into simply a bullet point list of characteristics that kind of, it kind of homogenizes you with everybody else. It's kind of hard to really showcase, or at least I have always felt that for me, I have a harder time showcasing who I really am, in a one-page Word document. Possible, but definitely a challenge. So I did a lot of homework on BFG. I think I read literally everything they have on their website. And when I saw things that they were doing, especially in-house, not only the fact that, yes, they have a blog and have had a blog for 5 years, but I saw that they did a lot of projects with even some of their creative staff, some of their design staff. They do this thing where whenever a new designer comes on board, they give them a blank skateboard deck, and one of their first jobs is to basically create their own skateboard deck, and then that actually gets hung up in the office. It showed me, it kind of said a lot about the personality of BFG and the type of people they want to have on board there. So you might say in some ways, by poking around their website and then reading their blog, I was able to discover a little bit about kind of the personality of the BFG brand. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that, I knew something like this would, I would say the chances that something like this would be really risky were certainly minimized.
Now, you told me that the culture, BFG's culture, was very creative oriented. In fact, they had projects that were completely non-billed just for the sake of exercising the creative muscle, and that was something that you really liked and you discovered along your research. Was there anything else about BFG or any other tips that you might be able to offer the job seekers about doing research and really targeting your message in your application?
Sure, absolutely. I think you talk about this in the job seeker's guide, that the two biggest things you can do is to understand who you are and understand the type of company that you want to work for. As I said, I've always felt a little challenged with really selling myself in a traditional resume, mm-hmm. and so I've always wanted to find a company that gave me the opportunity to break out of that and really just kind of be myself, rather than who I thought I needed to be in a traditional resume. Then as far as the kind of doing research on BFG goes, doing research on the target company, as I said, I read their blog. I spent time on their website, and I had already been following them on Twitter for a while. And so, and as a matter of fact, I believe I was following Sloane on Twitter before I was even following BFG. She took a trip last summer and had been tweeting about that, and somehow I got connected to that. So again, some of this just goes back to networking. And if you're in a space long enough, you show up, you contribute to the conversation. You contribute something that's funny, that's interesting, that's memorable, that's of value, and you basically give more than you ask for. You set yourself up to have a pretty successful future, or at least to find your way to a number of opportunities to be successful.
One of the questions that I got here on the panel was, is it a effective way to get seen by a company to just start tweeting about that company and start using the name of that company in your tweets to show that you're interested in that? Is that something that you might recommend?
I think it's possible. I mean, certainly if you're on Twitter and they're on Twitter, there's a way to make a connection there. You have to be really careful, I think, about just playing to the audience. And kind of, you don't want to be seen as, I'm just in this to get your attention. You don't want to pass yourself off as being more involved than maybe you really are. Mm-hmm. Twitter and really all social media, there's kind of a generally accepted principle of a certain degree of transparency. Mm-hmm. People don't like being game in social media. So if Twitter's a place that you would naturally go to talk about companies or to connect with people, then I think absolutely that's a great place to get in touch with a company or to talk about a company that you really admire. I shout out companies on Twitter all the time that I'm just big fans of, and they're not paid endorsements, or I've never really been contacted by many of the people. But I'm a self-confessed caffeine addict, and so I talk about Starbucks quite a bit because I think probably half of my income every month winds up going to Starbucks in one form or fashion.
Right.
But that's a space that I'm active in. That's something that, I'd be telling my friends how much I love coffee anyway. So again, there's opportunities connect, but make sure that if you're in these spaces, make sure you're being genuine, because sooner or later, if you're not, it's going to come back around to bite you.
It's great advice. It's really a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's all about transparency, and one way or the other, any kind of inconsistency is going to come across, I think, as a red flag. Sloane, you may have noticed this with some of your applicants, that they're just either inappropriate or inconsistent. How did you handle applicants who were like that?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier that it was a great way to really get to know some of the applicants, and it kind of goes back to this idea of personal branding. And Joshua, I know this is something that you dig into a lot in your videos, but this idea that you are kind of creating a public record of things that you're writing about or thinking about, and for someone can basically go back and see what you were tweeting about last week, and if it happened to be something inappropriate or something that might turn off a hiring manager or whatever, it's something to consider. And even outside of Twitter, it's definitely something to consider. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people don't really think about the footprint they're leaving behind, whether it's Facebook, and of course Facebook, changing their privacy standards and stuff. A lot of people have been upset about that, but I've noticed a lot of people too that maybe didn't really realize this was happening, and they are treating it still like it's a private space, and they haven't gone and fixed the settings. So, it's just something to think about really wherever you are on the web, is that, you are leaving behind this digital footprint of who you are, and it's trackable. People can go and look back, and it can work to your advantage, and it can also work to your disadvantage.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that a job seeker could make online is to just go out there and start filling out profiles, right, and being very flippant about their online presence. And I think you'd agree, both of you actually, that really sitting down and looking inside, knowing who you are, and then being strategic about your personal brand and how you fill things out is going to be really important in how you're perceived online and when you're Googled, what people find about you. So I have a really...
I'd agree.
Go ahead, Hal. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I completely agree with that, and this touches back on that. How risky was this? When I finished this Wired cover and posted this tweet, I know for the first time I was really excited about applying for a job, and I was really proud of what I produced. It was fun. It made me laugh. It brought a smile to my face. Mm-hmm. And so in that sense, I felt like I had been really true to myself. I figured, my guesstimate was that this was not inappropriate for my audience. But if there was the slightest chance that maybe they didn't get it, mm-hmm. then I had to be okay with going, okay, but if they don't get it, then that's probably not the right place for me. Mm-hmm. And so, and I had to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I get that question a lot from job seekers is, what if this doesn't work? What if being me? What if some people have to lie or feel like they have to lie or put a picture that doesn't really represent them online, and eventually they're going to find out who you are. And if they're not okay with that, then it's better for you to know actually right up front, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, I think when we talk about the cultural fit for someone joining our team, it really goes both ways. I mean, for Hal or anyone coming into BFG, in my mind, I would hope that it's a good fit for them too. And, in the past and even at other jobs, either, from myself actually joining the team or actually hiring someone, I've gone so far as to, offer a freelance gig for a week just to see if both parties are truly, making this work. In this case, I didn't need to do that because I think I already knew, just from this whole social media Twitter experiment that I knew it was going to be a cultural fit. But it definitely goes both ways. You want to be at a place where you're going to be happy and challenged on a daily basis.
That leads to a really nice question that I'm reading here from Stephen, and I'd like to read it to you. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. Twitter and blogging seem to be very logical and appropriate for appropriate media for obtaining employment in the creative industries, right, such as marketing, etc. But I'm not sure how useful it would be for me. I'm 60 plus. I have a LinkedIn profile, and I'm looking for a program manager or project director positions in more traditional organizations, and looking to retire from full-time work. There are only so many hours in the day that I can devote to job search, and obviously I want to create as much critical mass in my search as possible, in addition to ensuring that my LinkedIn profile is the best that it can be. Should I use Twitter, and should I start using blogging? I think the essence of the question is, if you're not going for a marketing job or a creative job, such as engineering or project management, does Twitter, blogging, and even in general creativity in your job search still matter? What do you guys think?
I would say absolutely. I know we've focused a lot on talking about the creative world and the ad world, just because that's kind of where Hal and I live and breathe at the moment. But the great thing about Twitter is, or really, the blogosphere in general, is that it's all about discovery. And I think that while the blogs I follow probably wouldn't be interesting to someone who is, an engineer or what have you, those sources do absolutely exist out there, and people do check in and, read those blogs on a daily basis or follow people like that on Twitter. It's all about finding, where your interests lie. My interests are definitely in the creative sphere, and a lot of the people that I follow on Twitter are in that world. But, we were talking earlier, I'm also really passionate about wine. So I follow a lot of people on Twitter who talk about nothing but wine. Okay. There's all kinds of these things out there. And I think that it's the sort of social media world, I think, is becoming more and more a part of a lot of people's jobs and just their own personal, kind of universe these days. So it's something I think that could help.
And, a follow-up question to that is asked by Jeff here, which is, I have political opinions, which I share with my Facebook friends. Am I putting myself at risk by sharing that with Facebook?
Oh, that's a really good one.
Yep.
We had a discussion in the office, myself and another gentleman that's in the content department, a couple of weeks ago, and that's something that I've struggled with. Like, I'll be honest on that. And when it comes to certain other blogs that I might read, that whether they have a religious or political bent, I think that's where you have to investigate, especially with a medium like Facebook. Number one, what are the privacy controls that you have in place? And number two, how are you using Facebook? I've recently kind of revamped, you might say, my Facebook, my personal Facebook strategy, in that I've actually kind of nobody wants to use this word, but I've actually pared down my friend list on Facebook quite a bit, so that I really only have friends with people that are truly close connections that I have. And I'm choosing to make most of my data private. And then this is just my take on that. But I think the overall principle is whatever level of privacy controls you use or whatever you decide to put on Twitter or Facebook, you have to realize that, number one, it is out there. Ideals of freedom of speech aside, just because you're free to say anything in an environment doesn't necessarily make it appropriate to say in an environment. So again, that just goes back to determining what do you want to use the medium for, and then choosing the appropriate privacy controls and kind of self-editing as appropriate for that audience.
Right. In other words, have a strategy, stick to that strategy. Know what you're trying to accomplish with the tool that you have your hands on. I think of it like a sculptor, right? Anyone can take a chisel, but not everyone can create a beautiful work of art from a block of wood. And it's really how you use the tool that's going to make the impact, not the tool itself. I think there's a overemphasis on social media as a paradigm shift, as sort of this huge revolution in the way we communicate. And I really have to differ from that. And I think they're just new tools that we have to learn how to use effectively. And as job seekers, I think it's very effective. One of the questions that I'm getting over and over is, we keep talking about Twitter and blogging. Does that mean LinkedIn isn't as important or Facebook's not as important? Or, how do we choose the right social medium as job seekers? This will be the last question, and then I'm going to take a quick tour of the inside of the video training. So I want you guys to take a quick 30-second stab at that question.
Yeah, I think that LinkedIn and other tools are definitely still really important, but it kind of goes back to to what we've been talking about throughout the conversation, which from a job seeker's perspective is really kind of doing your homework and doing your research. And if you have a dream job or a dream company out there that you're interested in pursuing, maybe it's a good idea to see where they are in that social sphere and how they're using these different tools. Or the alternative is to I think really to pick one or two of these areas and really own it. And if you are going to be in multiple places, make sure you are being consistent in the messages that you put out there. And it's the age of the personal brand. I think that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is. And how would you answer that question about choosing medium?
Sure. I was just going to concur with just about everything Sloane said. A lot of this goes back to the question the gentleman asked earlier about does he need to get into Twittering and blogging and all this, and really dive headfirst into social media when there's only so many hours in the day that you can devote to your job search. Well, it just goes back to what is the type of company, who are some of the companies you're looking at, and what spaces are they in. BFG does have a LinkedIn profile, but I've interacted even before I was an employee here. I got far more interaction with BFG and with people that worked for BFG through the blog and through Twitter than I did on LinkedIn. That may not be the case for every industry or every company. So again, go back to what's your target company? Where are they at? Mm-hmm. And invest your time and resources there. If they're on Twitter, if they're on Facebook, then jump on board, jump in. The learning curve is pretty forgiving. As I say, give more than you take. Listen a little more than you talk. Yeah. But if your company, your industry is not really active in that space right now, then unless it's just a hobby of yours, don't waste your time. Don't look at it as a primary means of job search. Know your audience.
Exactly right. So it's not about having the prettiest LinkedIn profile. It's about knowing where they hang out online, and then going there and interacting with them. That's a really great point, Hal. We'll come back to you guys in a second. I just want to take a moment and show everyone the inside view of the Job Seeker's Guide to Social Media. And so when you get into the product and you get access to the course, this is the first page that you come to. And what I do is I have a quick 25-minute video which gives you tips that you can use right off the bat. We're getting a lot of questions today about how do you use Twitter, how do you follow topics, how do you find people, how do you get started if you're a real newbie. And this course actually takes you through step-by-step how to do that. So basically each of the 5 modules here have between 4 to 8 videos associated with each one, and each video lesson has a downloadable sheet and it's packed with resources. So we talked a lot about strategy, Hal, and not just going out there and flippantly putting stuff online, but to really know what you're trying to say and to whom. And that's all about finding your brand, looking inside, and then looking at your target audience. And then we look at online resumes, online reputation for when you get Googled, not if. And there's actually an entire module dedicated to Twitter, because I think it's more than just what you had for breakfast. I mean, that's important too, but there's a lot to it. And so for newbies with Twitter, this will be a really valuable lesson. And then we get into interviews and actually go into the steps that Hal took and other job seekers took that I've spoken with to use social media to do that. And so when you get started, you come here into the first module, which is personal branding. and you get access to these 6 videos and navigation here on the right. And then when you drill down into the video itself, you can watch it here, and then every video comes with a downloadable action sheet. So what happens is by the time you finish the course, you'll have 25 pages filled with notes of your personal job search strategy actually right there in front of you. For those of you who, who like to skim, there are always bullet points about the topics that are covered in the video. And additional notes, oftentimes I think of something after I've recorded the video and I want to emphasize it, or there's some points within the video that I want to make sure are emphasized. And then every video has resources. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they're not, but they are here for you to find. This particular video is about keyword research, which is often overlooked when creating online profiles. So there's an entire lesson on how to actually get your keywords so that you're ranking #1 on at least 3 of them to help you get found. The lessons on Twitter are here. There's 5 videos. Each one comes with, of course, the downloadable action sheet, the summary of what you learn, and these are resources. People are asking, well, how do I communicate with recruiters? I actually have a list of over 100 different recruiters here that you can follow. So there's just packed with resources that I'm giving away for to do this, and it is now open. So this is sort of the culmination of a lot of exclusive training I've done around in the Portland area for the last year. And people have been asking me to make this available to them regardless of where they live. And so if you have been following my blog, you've noticed I haven't been blogging a lot. And that's because I've been focusing almost exclusively on developing this content and really refining it so that you guys can get jobs as quickly as possible. And I'm giving away a lot of free stuff. So just by signing up, you're going to get a free LinkedIn profile audit. So you'll sign up, you'll send me your LinkedIn profile, and I'll actually do a professional audit on it to give you steps to improve it just as part of signing up. So as much stuff as I'm giving away, I can only keep this open for 1 week. So this is going to close on January 11th at midnight. So if you do have questions about using Twitter and social media and really creating a strategy for your job search, this is the only product or training course available that is completely comprehensive, and it's just for job seekers on using social media. So also, I'm giving away 2 live calls. So if you are going through the course and get stuck, and questions always come up, I want to make sure that I'm there for you. So there'll be 2 calls starting next week, and then 3 weeks after that, 2 weeks after that. So if you guys get stuck during the course, I am available to answer any questions live. And there are bonuses that, if I get questions a lot about particular technology, I'll actually do a screencast and just put it in bonuses for free. So there's a lot of answers that questions that I answer in this course. So definitely worth taking a look. We're coming up on the end of the hour here. We got about 5 minutes left, and we do have more questions. But I want to leave the space to let you guys, Hal and Sloane, end with any last words for job seekers out there. Maybe they're not in the creative industry, such as you guys. Maybe they're new to social media. What would you recommend as a first step, at least if they were to walk away with one thing from today's conversation? What would it be? Sloane, why don't you go ahead first with this?
Sure, yeah. I think, some of what you've been talking about, Joshua, with regards to social media kind of being, a new tool among many, I think that's really important. Face-to-face networking and interaction is definitely still important. It's not going anywhere. So, I would recommend really, using a combination of different tactics. If you are in the job market, social media is a really great way, I think, to get yourself out there and to potentially stand out a little bit from the crowd. People with social media knowledge and skills, I think, are becoming more and more in demand, and that's only going to increase as time goes on, and more people start getting involved in the space. But definitely don't discount some of the offline things too. And every community that I've ever lived in, there's always something going on with, groups of professionals, or sometimes they're, very highly targeted groups. We have social media club, here in Savannah for people who are in that industry, but there's so many other groups that get together and meet after hours. So I would just encourage people to take advantage of those things as well as the social space, and really find the right mix.
Right, get out there and meet people as well as develop your online reputation. Hal, what would you leave folks with?
More of the same, really. Definitely know who you are and what you're looking for in a company. I mean, the reality is we've all had to take jobs because we have to pay the rent. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we should all be able to describe the type of job or the type of environment that we want to be a part of, and we know that when you know what you're looking for, mm-hmm. It's surprisingly easier to find it. And then secondly, so not only know who you are and what you want out of a company, but back to you want to make sure you know as much as you can about any job or any company that you apply for, and so depending on what's appropriate, or where that company, where the people who work for this company are active, whether it's online, whether it's offline, mm-hmm. or both, just show up and interact, show up with consistency and contribute something of value. And sooner or later, opportunities are going to open up for you.
I love that. Stop spraying and praying. Be specific, focused, and targeted. That's really great advice. And if you guys, I'm getting questions about, people want to connect with you, Hal and Sloane. So would it be all right if I send out an email to participants with your Twitter handles?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd
okay.
be happy to, answer any questions after the fact.
And Hal, Sloane, thank you very much for your time today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think everyone on the call here got a lot of really fabulous information for their job search. Thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for all the great questions to the audience.
Thank you, too. Yep, thanks to the audience for participating. And have a great week.